All right, we've built up a lot of our review Rick and Morty app. We have pagination, we have search, although we've only set the search to really search for alive or dead status. And then we have pagination through search. Um, let's go ahead and add some Cypress tests here. So I'm going to kill this. I'm going to install Cypress. npm install Cypress save dev. And now I'm going to set up the Cypress config file, and I will go to their docs for this. This is actually what I was working on updating just a moment ago. Let's just pull up the install steps, which are pretty straightforward. And then what we want to do is, oh no, I'm sorry. I'm confusing Cypress and Tailwind. I apologize. My brain is a little fried. So that's actually the main thing that we need to do. Um, this will create a Cypress config file for us. I believe I need to run the Cypress open command. And in fact, I'm going to have to exit full screen because Cypress is going to demand its own window. Let me exit full screen here. We'll kind of set this stuff up like this, and let me pull up Cypress. So when you run, so just to repeat the install steps, it's going to be, and this is in our curriculum, npm install Cypress save dev, and then npx Cypress open. And running that will open this up. And we want to choose end-to-end testing. And this creates a Cypress config file for us. Some stuff that we don't really need to worry about. And then we can hit continue. We're going to use Chrome. I don't think any of you will have any issues. If you do, use Chromium. And so now this opens up another Chrome browser, which is Cypress running. And we don't have any tests yet. So let's hit scaffold example specs. Actually, you could do either of these. This will create a bunch of examples. Um, you won't need to do this for the assessment since they'll already exist. This creates empty ones. I am going to scaffold some example ones as I may need to refer to them to be honest. And so now it's created a bunch of example specs, and I'm going to give Cypress a little less screen real estate, and let's walk through what it just did. So now if I look here under source, there's a Cypress config JS file, and there's an object here for setting up an end-to-end testing config. We do have to make a couple changes in here. Um, we need to tell it the base URL, which is going to be the URL of our React app. So localhost 51, port 5173. We don't want it to make support files. We outside of this end-to-end configuration object, we can add some viewport height and width settings. These aren't strictly necessary, but if you want to control how big the Cypress window is, we can do it here. Actually, let's make the width 1024 and the height 768. What's most important is this right here. Video false. Otherwise, Cypress will record videos when it runs tests. And that's just a pain and not what we want. The other thing we want to do is we want to go to our package.json and we're going to add some helper scripts for working with Cypress. So that's the open Cypress. And then to run Cypress, and this is the one we'll use more, side run. So I'm actually going to quit this and I'm going to quit Cypress. And I'm just going to do npm run side run just to make sure my npm script is up and running correct. And I forgot that to use Cypress, I need to have my dev server running because Cypress is now trying to talk to it now that we've set a base URL. And I think I'm just in the wrong directory here. So let me go to where we have our lesson. Let's do npm run dev. And now dev server should be up and running. Let's run Cypress again with npm run sci open, or excuse me, npm run sci run. So sci run Cypress tests from the command line. This can be useful like while you're coding, but it's actually, and we can see this happening here with the headless browser, where it's running all those commands. But it's actually sci open that's more useful for us. And my apologies for the confusion here. And here we just go again to end-to-end testing and select Chrome. And like while you're developing and working on the assessment, this is probably what you want to have open is running this sci open command because now you can have all of your different tests here. And it's this Cypress directory. Yeah, it's in the right spot. And end to end is where we're going to see stuff. And this is where we'll see the tests that are in the assessment. Um, and just as a refresher on what a Cypress test looks like, they're wrapped in describe blocks, which have a description, and then an arrow function that's a wrapper that puts this on standby to run when the test is run. A before each function that again takes an arrow function as a callback that puts this on wrapper. And then each individual test is an it block, which has a description, and then the arrow function that puts this on standby to run. And the before each will run before each individual test. And we can use the site object to get things, to visit sites, and do all sorts of stuff. So let's go ahead and let's just make a my tests.cy.js file. And let's go ahead and start writing some tests. Let's call this validate nav bar structure. And give me just one moment to pull up the guide code that I want to use here for this from our other day with Cypress. So as I said, this is just a little bit of a context switch for me. Okay, there we go. So we're always going to want to really, before each of these tests, visit our app and we can just add the base route because in the Cypress config, we set the URL already. And we just want to do a couple simple tests. Let's test that the nav bar has links. Um, and why don't we like test that the nav bar has a title. So the easiest way to build these tests out is we're going to just want to build, we're going to want to go here. And in the elements tab, we're just going to have to look at the structure of the navbar. Um, in fact, what could be even easier is testing for the existence of the search bar. But let's start with the navbar. So let's just start with this one. And we're going to do sci.get. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to look inside here. And I see that I'm looking for um, an A tag that has the class navbar brand. So we're going to do sci.get, and we should be able to do a dot navbar brand. And we'll grab the first one because .get returns an array of all the things. So even if there's just one, it'll do that. And we're going to say it should exist. And we're also going to say it should contain the text Rick and Morty. So let's give this a shot now in Cypress and see if this is working or if I got this wrong. Um, let's close these out. Let's go to my tests. And it looks like I do have an issue. Sci.get.first.should exists is not a function. Um, this is just a simple error on my part. The syntax for this should be like this. And same with over here. The syntax looks like this, which is a little weird. So let me shrink this a bit. Can you all read this okay, or is that too small? Okay, perfect. So this is the Cypress syntax is a little funky, and this is where I think like having the Cypress docs open will be useful. Um, but you can see should takes one or more strings as arguments, and these are sort of magic strings, and this is sort of like command line flags, right? So we're testing for existence, and we're testing that um, the text contains Rick and Morty somewhere inside it. And if just to kind of walk through what's happening here, we see sci.visit takes us to the home page. Andy, yes, sir.
I don't mean to derail you or anything, but this stuff is you already kind of covered in the other video. I was hoping to see something like more complex, like the search bar
Yeah.
or um um fetching data and stuff like that.
No, we can totally do that. And let's tackle the search bar after this one. In part, I just wanted to warm myself up here, but I appreciate the nudge. Perfect. Well, I'll just finish walking through this and then we'll do the search bar. So, like you were saying, we saw how this grabs each bit and then just moves through to get the assertion. So let's build out one for the search bar, like you were saying. Um, so let's uh, search bar. It's not going to be the greatest description. It's just going to be search bar works. So let's test search from homepage navigates user to search results page. Let's test search from homepage for unknown. Will display on the search results page the first 20 results for characters with status unknown, right? So what I'm testing here is from the home page, I want to type unknown. I want to hit search. I want to make sure I navigate to the right page. In fact, we should test too that the query param is set here. So we can do that as well. So, and that the query param is correct. Truth be told, we could combine a lot of this into one test if we want. It's just sort of a good habit to break them up. And then we want to test that I not only navigate to the home page, but it shows the results that I expect. So let's start building this one out. So again, we need to start by navigating to the home page, right? And now I'm going to need to grab the search element. So we need to get an input element, and there's only one. So that makes it relatively easy. And let's just do this. It's and let's do sci.get input first. And Cypress has a type method, which is great because it makes life really simple. If I can just find my Cypress docs. And again, I believe in the docs, it is under interacting with elements, right? And this is sort of the good stuff for a lot of these docs. And so this is great because I can just type into the text there. And we're just going to type in unknown. And that will type unknown into this search box. Next, I need to grab this button element. Um, and to be honest, if I was doing this for real, I would probably add a class or an ID onto this button. In fact, I will. I don't think any of these are buttons in the nav bar, but just to be safe, let's go ahead and let's go to app.jsx and let's in fact add class name. We'll just call it search input. And for the button, let's add a class name too of search button. And now my Cypress tests can be way less brittle. And also I don't have to worry about if there's a button hiding in here or something. So this now looks like this search input where we're saying get the input element that has this ID. And now let's do sci.get button with ID search button. And let's grab the first. And all we have to do is click on it, right? Because that will take us to the next page. Now, I do need to figure out, I need to look at the Cypress stocks to confirm the URL changes correctly. I do need to also confirm we see search results page content. Let's just start by checking for this search results page title, because that's always there. We're also going to need to wait a little bit so Cypress doesn't move faster than React app or our API call. So let's do wait, and this will wait for a number of milliseconds. And let's just have it wait for 1000 milliseconds. So now let's get the URL. And I am going to go to the Cypress docs here. Let's see here, URL. Get the current URL of the page that is active. This is an alias of site location href. Perfect. So sci URL should, I'm pretty sure it's got an equal. And now let's put in what the URL should be. Let me make sure that that is the correct URL. Results queue unknown. So that looks good. And now let's grab the title of the page, which should be search results. I'm going to use the element inspector to help me here. And we're looking for an H1. There's actually a couple H1s here. In fact, I feel like that should be an H3 and not an H1. So I'm going to make a minor change here, though it's not strictly necessary, just for my own sanity. If I go to search results page, this should really be an H2. Let's give this, let's just give it a class name. We could give it a ID too, but let's just call it page title. And let me close these out. Get back to our tests. So now I can do sci.get, and let's make this 2 seconds just to be really safe. Let's look for an H2 element that has a class name of page title, and it should exist, and it should contain search results. So let's see how we do now running this in Cypress. And I wonder if, do I need to restart something? Yeah, when I was writing all this code, it made Cypress unhappy. So let's just run this again. And that's not a Cypress thing. That's just when you're developing and actively changing stuff. And now I should be able to click on my tests. There we go. Cypress could not detect in this file, Webpack compilation error. This looks like I have a typo in my code still. So this is good news because this looks like some sort of typo that is an easy fix. It's a little hard to see, but it's all the way down here. Unexpected token, expected comma, line 37. So since we don't need a comma here, that almost definitely means I have a syntax error somewhere in this code that's breaking something. So let's see where it is. And I think the easiest way to do that is to comment stuff out until it works.
I think you're missing an ending parentheses after it. You have an opening and it's
Oh,
red.
yeah, that is absolutely it. Thank you. Perfect.
Sure.
Best kind of problem to have. There we go. Let's see. Timed out after 4,000 milliseconds. Expected to find element input, search input, but never found it. Let me restart the dev server here. Let's also look here to make sure I did this right. Input, I added search input as the class, not the ID. So I goofed and I added it as the class on the button as well. So that was my goof. So if we go in app.jsx, we can see I just out of habit added these as the class name and not the ID like I was talking about doing, which is fine. And really either one will work fine. And so for our purposes, I think the easiest thing is we just change this to be classes, the class selector and not the ID selector. And I think that will resolve that issue. And indeed, search bar works. If we click on this test, we visit the home page, we get input, search input, we get the first one. We type some stuff into it. We type in the text unknown. We get the button. We click on the button. It navigates us. We wait. We check that the URL is as expected, which it's a little hard for us to see here, but I think the query param is there. We grab the page title, and that's as expected, and our test passes. So you guys can see how the cool thing about Cypress is I just have to drive the browser, right? And then Cypress is really nicely designed. Like the fact that I can just use type and click makes this so easy. Um, so in the interest of time, I'm not going to write another it block, but I think let's just add these as additional assertions. So does that sound good to folks? Awesome. So that's the next thing that I want to test is that the first 20 results for characters with unknown are displayed on the search results page. From that, we could also test the button clicks if people want. Are there any requests for other stuff that we should test with Cypress?
The only thing I was maybe gonna suggest, and I don't know how effective it'll be, would maybe be testing something you haven't made yet, and then like building that in the code to pass the test.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not gonna be able to do that on the fly. It's
Okay.
gonna get too messy. Like you mean like true test driven development style?
Yeah, I mean, obviously for the assessment, that's how we're being tested, but it's a little bit different when you have somebody else writing a test
Right.
than just like, hey, pass this test by doing this thing, and then you just scroll over and you write some code that does
Right.
it. It's pretty, I don't know how much help that would be.
So you raise a really good point. And let's talk about the tests on the assessment and how to code against them. Um, there's two pieces to the puzzle. There's three pieces to the puzzle, really. One is, and sort of the foundational one is like the concepts you've been learning in class and the sort of design patterns you've seen us use in the assignments, in the review session, and all of that. Because the assessment's going to follow those, right? So that's sort of helps you, I think, sketch in the big picture. I would start there. Next is going to be the README that tells you at a high level what you need. And then it gets very granular in saying, like, you should create these components that do these specific things. And I would start there and I would spend some time. And like you saw me do in the review, I would make a list of pages, I would make a list of features, and I would draw some TL draw diagrams with components before even writing any code. Um, I would recommend then I would maybe look at the tests. I wouldn't get too lost in the sauce right away with the tests because they can get more detailed, and as you pointed them out, reading them can be some effort. But I would start with maybe like the first test because the README and the stuff we've learned in the review and stuff is going to tell you how to build your skeleton, right? And that's not really going to change. And I would build the skeleton first, the same way you saw me doing the review. And then I would just start with the first Cypress test. And the tests all kind of go in order and build on each other that way. So you're going to want to read that Cypress test through to understand it, and that will take some time. But you don't need to read all of them through before writing code. You know what I mean? I think that's going to be too much. I would start with test number one and then work on writing code to get test number one to pass. And that I think would have been good to demo, but you guys saw me do that workflow with the to-do lists and the pseudocode and kind of adding stuff one at a time and testing as I go. So I would take that same approach, but just flip the script where you read test number one, look at it, and write the code to get it to pass. The README is also going to help you there because it will have instructions and you'll know what the feature is. And so I would just you build it one little feature at a time. Um, Focus on get the feature working and then focus on getting that test to pass. Because if you try to start with getting the test to pass, you'll get lost in the minutia of the class name should be this instead of that. Um, that said, you do want to make sure that you get that test number one to pass before you go too deep into building out too many features and go to test two or three and so on. And so if you do it that way, where you build your skeleton, you make your feature list, you figure out, all right, this is the feature that test one does, and the README will give you a guide to build feature one, get test one to pass, build feature two, get test two to pass, and so on. I think you'll find that that will help kind of reduce the cognitive load of reading the Cypress tests. Um, All right, let's yeah, because that's a great question. And in a perfect world, I think it would be cool to see that demoed. I think the good news is you'll see that the workflow is actually closer to what I showed in the review than you think. Also, realistically, I will say Cypress tests are probably some of the more persnickety end-to-end tests to write. And I don't think tons of people in the real world are writing Cypress tests first and then writing code to match them. You normally do that with like unit tests because it's way, way easier. Aaron, yes, sir.
As a side semi-related note, this conversation that we just had over the past like 2 minutes would have been very helpful before the OOP test.
Mm,
Because like I found myself, I built the entire thing, it met the README, and then it's like, oh, I should probably test this, and it like passed two tests or something.
yeah,
But just that same like understanding the right mentality to still build your code, but also keep the tests in mind throughout the process. I
yeah,
think it would be very helpful for the rest of the
Yeah.
group.
I bounced back and forth. I got like halfway through,
yeah.
tried tests, failed, went back. Like I did this whole thing. But I do think that us, at least for the first assessment, not hearing it and kind of like grinding our teeth on it on our own is huge for like future stuff because now we have this like, oh, okay, I don't want to deal with that again. Like I'd better take my time and like really think this one through.
I will say it depends on the person and it's a little 50-50. I have learned the hard way that a lot of this workflow stuff, it, you kind of got to get your fingers burnt until it makes sense. Because I've done the opposite where I'm telling people all this stuff in like week one, and it's way too much too soon. And if I think about how I learned to code, it definitely was that way, where like so it's a bit of a balance. And you may be right that sharing it a bit more is there. I have also found though that I think there's just a part of the learning curve that's like, if you don't encounter the problem, the solution doesn't really make sense and it's not going to stick. It's the same with Git. Like we have these Git workshops that we do right around the personal project that kind of go deeper into stuff, but we kind of wait till the end so that you guys have spent enough time with Git and hopefully suffered a little bit along the way, though hopefully not too much. But yeah, man, I agree with you. Probably some of that is valuable. Um, but again, the good news is my experience is that all the real valuable lessons in programming only happen after the 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 frustration of the time spent debugging. Like, and I think that's true for everyone I know in tech, in terms of like workflow or command line skills or what have you. Um, the good news is you guys are at the point now where like you put in those hours, you know what I mean? And so now like if you guys go online, like there's whole articles, there's whole books about debugging. I have a couple in the classroom and they're really good, but it's a little too much when you're still just learning the fundamental workflow. But you guys are kind of at the point now where you can start to leverage that stuff more. Um, Let me go ahead and build this out just so we can see this, and then that might be a good stopping point. And to be totally honest, I have to make sure I remember how to do this. So we need to, and this is maybe a good workflow thing to show as well. I need to grab all the elements that have characters. I need to check that the length is correct. And I should spot check a couple to make sure they have correct values. So I am totally going to cheat here. I'm going to grab this. Oops, excuse me. Sorry about that. And I am going to, this is grabbed from API call. And we'll just do correct answers. And bear with me one sec here as I turn these into strings. One moment. And this is something called a Vim macro. So you would have to be using the Vim VS Code extension to do this. I basically recorded some keystrokes and like repeated it a whole bunch of times. But I'm sure VS Code has another way to do macros as well, because most programming text editors do. So really, this const shouldn't live in my it statement. It should live outside of it, but that's okay. Let's just go down here and put this here. So now let's hop over to my search results and let's examine the HTML. And we see that these are a bunch of divs. This is a bit of a challenge because the divs don't have a class name. And there's tons of divs in here. So again, I need to modify my code. So we're going to go to the search results page. And it looks like I changed something. And we're going to go here and we're going to add a div class. And we're going to call it search result item. And now in my tests, I can do sci.get. And remember, I already have navigated to the page and done the search. Sci.get div.search result item. And I can do should have length 20. And let's make sure that that works. And it looks like have length is not correct. I probably need to put, let's see if it's that I need to put 20. No, I don't think that's the issue. I'm looking at my guide code, and the issue is just this is have dot length, which is, I'm going to be honest, super annoying. But again, the good news here is you can look this up in the Cypress docs. And that's the other thing I think, like a lot of the times I've learned the hard way with debugging. If I had just looked at the docs right away, I would have saved myself like 20 minutes. But it's always a little bit of a pain to look at the docs. Like you kind of want to avoid it. So I've kind of learned sometimes you just got to force yourself to read the docs. So this is good. Now let's spot check some to make sure that they are correct. And the first one should contain correct answers, Sub-Zero, Abraham, Linkendorf. So let's do it like that. And I bet Cypress has a last, though I'm actually not sure. But that will actually fail because it doesn't contain Adolf Lincolnler, the sort of Rick and Morty version of Abraham Lincoln. And we'll fix that in a sec. Let's just look at this in Cypress so we can see it in action. So if we sort of look at this test, we've gone here, we've gotten the page title, we've checked the page title is correct. We get all those divs. We assert the length is 20. We use first to grab the first one. We do our comparison. We grab the last one. And because we haven't updated that part of the test that fails, which is good, it's good to make sure that a test fails for the right reason. So let's have this be 19, our last person, the Fleeb. And now the test pass. And so that is really the magic of Cypress and Cypress testing. And you guys can see how if I wanted to test the next button, which I guess I can't click on here, but it would be really very similar to what we did here, where I just need to grab the button using the CSS selector syntax and click on it. And then I need to know what the data should now look like, right? And so I would need to grab that from my actual application, but then I can test that as well in a relatively straightforward way. Do you guys want to test the search buttons? We have a couple minutes. We could try to add a card in or some favorite stuff. Or is this a good stopping point?
I think it was good for me. I feel better than the last assessment that we're going into.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think you guys will find that it's a smoother run. Let me go ahead and stop the recording real quick.